And now a reading from Paul's letter to the Romans. Listen now for God's word. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of yourself more highly than you ought, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body there are many members, and not all the members have the same function, so we, who are many, are one body in Christ, and individually we are members one with another. We have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us: prophecy in proportion to faith, ministry in ministering, the teacher in teaching, the exhorter in exhortation, the giver in generosity, the leader in diligence, and the compassionate in cheerfulness. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In an ordinary year, this would be the time of year that the state fair would begin, ordinarily. Now, I know the state fair isn't for everyone, but I have come to dearly love the fair myself, and I usually end up going more than once if I can. It's not any one thing, but it's the whole thing together that makes it so compelling. It's the fair. There's the new foods, there's the old favorite foods, there's the crop art, there's the Sky Glider, Machinery Hill, Miracle of Birth. These are all stops that I make year after year. The livestock, the bandstand. It's not any one thing, it's the whole thing together that makes up the fair. Or if you really wanted to boil it down to being one thing, it's the people. It's called the Great Minnesota Get-Together for a reason. And it's a thrill to see people from all over this great state in one place. Well, the past few years, Kelly's had cousins that have shown goats for 4-H over the past few years. So you go to the goat barn and see these kids from outstate who are in the goat barn, kind of watching over their goats and their friends' goats, and they're in camp chairs, they're in long jeans, they're in work boots, even when it's hot outside. So you get this one slice, these teenagers. You also get the folks in the creative activities building looking over those beautiful quilts. Or you get the folks, the families, all over the place, pushing a stroller with kids in it, carrying them, walking with them alongside. And at the fair, it's every shade of people from all over the state. They're all enjoying something. Or come 4 o'clock or even earlier, sometimes you see the little kids who are no longer enjoying anything. But in the end, all these people are there together, are there for one reason. Now, that's a descriptor of the state fair, but it's also a descriptor of what the church is. The church is the people. Open up the doors and see all the people. From the beginning, the church has been a radically inclusive place. Elsewhere, Paul writes, neither Jew nor Greek, male and female, all are one in the body of Christ. Paul was writing to diverse communities across a whole region of the Mediterranean that was growing and changing so quickly, incorporating so many people from so many different new places. And Paul is writing to them, encouraging them toward unity in Christ. Here in the letter to the Romans, Paul is writing this letter to a church that he has not yet visited, to a people that he's not yet come to know. It's the only letter like that in the New Testament. But here in the letter to the Romans, Paul is encouraging those people all the same. Paul may not know who has which gifts, does not know the leaders of that church, but Paul knows that these are the gifts that a church requires. These are the gifts that God gives to the people of God. Here in the letter, Paul cites these gifts knowing the things that are needed to keep the whole body together. And he speaks to that unity of church, one church, that is made possible through the diversity of its members. Here to the Romans, Paul lists these gifts: prophecy in proportion of faith, ministry and ministering, the teacher in teaching, the exhorter in exhortation, encouragement, the giver in generosity, the leader in diligence, making sure things get done, and the compassionate, those called for most sometimes, in cheerfulness, that buoyant spirit. So all of these gifts, these 7 or 8 that he lists, they're all part of each other. And as Paul says, in one body, we have many members, and not all the members have the same function, but we who are many are one in the body of Christ. Individually, then, we are members one of another. That beautiful phrase, individually we are members one of another. Going back to the fair, in my mind, that mutuality, that sense of interconnectedness is part of what makes Minnesota a really great state. And again, I'm born and raised, and so it would be hard for me to talk so glowingly about any other place on earth. But to me, the cities, the Twin Cities, really provide a critical role for greater Minnesota or outstate Minnesota, and vice versa. They perform these roles. The land that goes to grow the food, well, that helps feed the cities, and the cities help that food reach broader markets. And so then that money goes back into those farmers, all that. It's an economic system that in so many ways makes sense. The Twin Cities and greater Minnesota sharing this mutual, interconnected, symbiotic relationship that makes the whole thing go and work. So too here in the church, that all of these gifts come together in mutuality to make the whole thing work. Now, accompanying this in Paul's letter, accompanying this list of gifts, is this call to humility. To humility. Paul says, "Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought." Now, again, I think in our state political discourse, when those bonding bills start to get tense, the political discourse sometimes loses track of that mutuality and interconnectedness. That city-outstate divide starts to get played up, and it's as if one is better than the other. Even there's the greater Minnesota. Either way, that there's this idea that one is better than the other, or that one is supporting the other unduly. But if we come to that with Paul's sense of humility instead, indeed, that sense of humility is something that informs our participation, individuals and community, in all things. We need to come into relationship with one another with that sense of humility, a sense of recognizing the ways that we rely on each other, that we are interrelated, that we are united. That sense of humility is also a powerful corrective to one of the places where idolatry can seep in sometimes. So often we start to think that we can handle it all by ourselves, that we are individuals, that we're like the Lone Ranger out on the plains, that's all down to one. The burdens we bear are ours alone. That's a form of idolatry. It's saying that we're in the place of God. But instead, if we come in with that perspective of humility, to recognize that the burdens we bear are not just ours, but are shared, to recognize that we can't just go it alone, whether that's going it alone as a community, as a congregation, as an individual, any of these things, that we must seek instead to be interrelated. That humility is a corrective there. That humility corrects the idea that we feel like we have everything we need and we don't need the gifts of others. So Paul frames these gifts with that sense of humility. Now, on the screen now for the video is a banner that we put up in our narthex more than a year ago. These were all these things that we wrote up as part of the gifts that each of us share as a congregation. Perhaps you recognize your words on here. Perhaps you recognize words that you feel drawn to. Perhaps you recognize something that you need. Perhaps you recognize a part of you that feels absent in this time. All together, this is who we are. These are the gifts that we bring as a congregation. So, this is our list, just like the list that Paul shares. Paul calls for cheerfulness, diligence, ministry, teaching, prophecy, all these things in ways you can see on our list of gifts too. Because these are the ways that the church comes together to be one body, the body of Christ in the world. Now, it is so much tougher to feel this right now. Sometimes it feels like we have that sensation of phantom limb, that a part of us feels missing because we can't be in one space together, because we can't share that coffee together on Sunday morning in fellowship. And yet, we are still the body of Christ. We are still given these gifts. And so let's dust them off. Let's do this together. We will continue to be the church, even as this pandemic still keeps on. It's not going away yet. We must enter with humility, to come in and to look around and seek to be the whole body, even when we are dispersed and distant. And so what does it mean for us to be the church right now? This is not just a question that falls on our COVID task force. It's not just a question that falls on the session or me or Jusun. It's a question that falls on all of us. How are we called to be the church? How are we called to express those gifts that we shared? Because that is living out being the body of Christ. That is living out being the church. That is something in which we all share right now. And the truth is that the world needs that truth now more than ever. We need that image of unity, mutuality, interconnectedness, connection, love, diversity. We need that more than ever. We could have really used an Olympics this summer. We could have used that image of humanity at its best, striving to better itself. People striving to work in teams, people striving to the best of their ability. We could have used an Olympics this summer. We could have used a state fair right about now. That sense of coming together, that sense of unity in our glorious, beautiful, myriad forms of diversity. We could have used that image. We could have used that inspiration. And truly, those two events, the Olympics, the state fair, not having those, and the reasons we're not having those, do end up being that kind of message, a message of humility, of unity, of compassion for one another, and diligence in leadership. All of these things became symbols, but we still could have used that opening ceremonies. We still could have used that chance to be packed together all in one great fair. So instead, what are we called to do? How are we called to share that unity with the world? How are we called to share that with our little corner of the world? So we see the ways in that banner. We see the ways that we have been the church to one another in the past. And so let us now, in this time, be called to share those gifts and the new gifts that we find in ourselves every day. Let us share those gifts with one another in new ways for the church today, in this unknown today, in this unforeseen today, as we together step day by day into the future God has planned for us. It's our job to be the church, to be the body of Christ, inspired by God, empowered by the Holy Spirit, to serve Christ in our daily tasks. It's our task to bear with one another in humility. And it's our task to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, living together in the love of Christ. Let's go and do that. Thanks be to God. Amen.